Hey everyone, it's time. Thanks for coming in. We are streaming this, or audio is streaming. This is being recorded, so if you need to leave, you won't miss the session. That recording will still be available. I'm Chris Freeland. If you are here to hear about new advances in resource sharing, you are in the right place. With a caveat. Our panel fell apart because of sickness and travel delays, which I think is a theme that all of us who've now been coming back to conferences are familiar with. So as originally envisioned, this was going to be a conversation between the Internet Archive, the Boston Library Consortium, and Ex Libris to talk about the work that we're doing together in the resource sharing space. Then it was going to be Internet Archive and Ex Libris, but Mike Richins is sick after coming back from an international conference. So it's me. And so we're changing this a little bit. I'm just now going to talk about interlibrary loan at the Internet Archive. So this will probably be a shorter session. We have, or the different way of thinking about it is maybe there's more time for questions directed to the Internet Archive. So. Thanks for coming, and thanks for bearing with the session change. As I mentioned, I'm Chris Freeland. I'm the director of the Open Libraries program at the Internet Archive. I am a librarian. Before working at the Internet Archive, I started 5 years ago working at the Internet Archive. Before that, I was an associate university librarian at Washington University in St. Louis, and before that, I was the technical director of the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which is an international consortium of the world's leading natural history libraries. So for more than 15 years, I've been working, more than 20 years, I've been working in and around libraries, helping to make materials as widely available as technology and copyright permit. Now, for the past 5 years, I've been working inside the Internet Archive and working, I should mention in those previous projects, I worked in partnership with the Internet Archive to digitize materials. And now I'm helping other libraries do the same. In terms of links and resources, I have my Twitter handle here is @ChrisFreeland. I have tweeted out a couple links to the session. So if you're interested in our FAQs and some what's next, I've got those linked there on my Twitter account @ChrisFreeland. I'd love to see a show of hands in the audience for the librarians. How many of you worked in your college library? So I did, and I worked in interlibrary loan, and it's crazy for me to be here, 25 plus years later as a professional librarian, thinking back to some of the work that I did in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, when I was photocopying materials for interlibrary loan. I worked in access services, circulation, interlibrary loan was part of that. So we'd go, get the book truck and retrieve the books and then photocopy them and staple them and put them in the mail or possibly fax them if someone could take a fax. And here we are. Interlibrary loan is still a library superpower. It's still one of the most amazing things, I think, one of the most amazing practices that libraries have in our toolkit. And I want to talk to you today about what the Internet Archive is doing with resource sharing and why we've gotten involved. So the Internet Archive is a nonprofit library. We're headquartered in San Francisco, and many of you may know about the Internet Archive through the Wayback Machine, our work in crawling the web and archiving those archives, those web pages for the past 25, now 26 years. In addition to the web archive and the Wayback Machine, we have built a collection, a physical collection of library materials, both periodicals as well as monographs. I'm going to talk about the periodicals. I don't have a slide for the monographs, but I'll talk about them. So in terms of what do we have for periodicals at the Internet Archive? I previously mentioned the Biodiversity Heritage Library. That was a project where we worked together to digitize a very large number, tens of thousands of periodicals that are materials cited in the work of systematics and nomenclature, so the naming and the describing of species around the world. All of the libraries, the 20+ libraries that are members of the Biodiversity Heritage Library, worked together to digitize their backlist and especially serials to make those materials available. We worked in partnership with the Internet Archive. All of those materials are at the Internet Archive and available for use. We also, through the work of our web archiving activities, we have more than 30 million articles that have been extracted out of web archives. Those are now available for search at scholar.archive.org, so Internet Archive Scholar. And for anyone who has a question, yes, Google knows about Internet Archive Scholar. They are cool with the use of the term. We had an affirmative thumbs up there. And then, in addition to the materials that we've worked with our partners to digitize and the materials that we've been able to gather from the web, the Internet Archive has also received donations of microfilm and other microforms where we have been digitizing those materials and making those available, and now more than 14,000 titles in one particular donated collection. So that's the materials that we're talking about here in terms of interlibrary loan. I mentioned I don't have a slide for monographs. I'll just tell you about the monographs that we have. In addition to the millions of books that are in the public domain that we've digitized in partnership with our libraries, we also have now more than 3 million modern monographs that are available through controlled digital lending. And I'll talk through the course of this conversation which of these different media types are available through the different providers, the resource sharing networks, and how and why, if I know the answer to the why. We joined the Boston Library Consortium in 21, and with the goal of expanding our resource sharing activities. The Internet Archive has a long history of working in partnership with the Boston Library Consortium, and I see Susan Stern here, Stern's here in the back. This long history started actually almost 12 years ago now in digitizing works that the partners of the Boston Library Consortium held. And in fact, what is now called controlled digital lending was then called Digitize and Lend, and it started with libraries in the Boston Library Consortium. So long history of working in partnership with the libraries of the Boston Library Consortium as an organization and with the individual partners of the BLC. But this story starts in February of 21, which is that we started a pilot with Rapid. And the question is, why? Why did you get into resource sharing? And as a library, we've been hearing our partners wonder, like, wouldn't it be great? How can my library get access to the resources that the Internet Archive has, and how can we use that to fulfill requests? And so we started looking at who could we partner with, who could we do pilots with, and start figuring out how we would apply our library or make our content and our materials available through these resource sharing networks. So we started with Rapid because they were fast, as the name suggests. So there once we got up and running, it was very, very quick to get up and running with Rapid, again, as the name suggests. And what we're putting forward through the Rapid network, 2 million books, and the 13,000 periodical titles. And we're updating that content monthly, and we have more than 250 libraries that are requesting materials from the Internet Archive through Rapid. Then in May, we started a pilot with IDS Project, which is an ILLiad plugin. There are more than 100 libraries in that network, and our participation there is 4 million books and all of the periodicals that we have. And you may see a number changing between the 2 million versus 4 million books, or all periodicals versus 13,000 titles. That's based on each resource sharing network has its own parameters around what they are interested from the Internet Archive of making available. So that's why you're seeing this sort of difference across providers or across networks. Then in January of this year, we did a pilot of the free ILLiad plugin, and again, this is putting forward 4 million books and all the periodicals that we've digitized. Then in April, we started a pilot with OCLC in WorldShare. And there, we're only doing periodicals, no monographs, and that's 11,000 periodicals that we make available to the WorldShare network. A little bit about the way that we do fulfillment. So what you're seeing here, the goalposts, the blue dots, are where we have scanning centers and where we have librarians and library technical assistants who are working in support of resource sharing and or scanning materials. So you can see we have good global time zone coverage, a little bit light there in the Middle East, but good coverage generally. And in fact, our response time, our goal is to try to respond within minutes, and our average response, it depends on the resource sharing network, but we're anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes for fulfilling a request. Now, what you can see here is, we said is, sometimes it takes longer on nights and weekends. And again, that's just an artifact of where we have people on to fulfill their requests. As I mentioned earlier, we now have more than 250 libraries that are partnering with us, borrowing materials from us. Great list. We'd like to have more. We get questions about, well, what are people requesting? And if you're working in resource sharing, you know the kinds of things that are coming through the through the request. It's primarily articles, and here's just some snapshot of some of the titles that have been article titles that have come through the request. It's all over the place, and again, every librarian, everyone working in resource sharing is familiar with this breadth of things. When I was a student worker, I was always like, what does this go for? Who is requesting this? Science and research, it's great. In terms of some stats, this may also be of no surprise to the other professionals in the room, but we are highest in inquiry or interest in the 1990s. So that's where we're primarily fulfilling requests, is from that period of the 90s into the 2000s, where materials, and what we've heard from historians is that that's the window that they're now looking at, right? So you kind of have 30 years as you're reflecting on what happened 30 years ago. And so that kind of lines up then with, well, we're fulfilling a lot of requests from the 90s. Also, these are materials that aren't generally electronically available in other forms, so they have to request through interlibrary loan. They're not natively available on the web. As I mentioned, we get more requests for articles. It also may be an artifact of that we have more more materials available for request than necessarily for monographs. But 2/3 of our requests are for articles, and 1/3 are for chapters. Like every other library, we go through the same holiday slump. I'll note that when we were, if you look at just the first little rise and then the plummet, things started getting nervous for people, for our engineers who were unfamiliar of the tempo and the cadence of academic research libraries. We're like, what has happened? December of 21, everyone was afraid that things were broken, and I was like, folks, they're gone. Like, no one's on campus. Like, this follows the same pattern that most academic libraries find and see. So happily, though, things started going back up in January. So we follow that same. We have the holiday slump, we have the summer plateau, and then an increase in request as classes come back into the fall semester. So I would anticipate, this graph was generated last week, so I would expect to see a similar drop. What we don't have mapped on here that would be interesting is, well, when did we join those other resource sharing networks, and what did that make a change in terms of the number of requests that we're fulfilling? Last week, we had our best day ever in terms of interlibrary loan. So we fulfilled 449 requests that day. I think this was the 25th. 90% of those requests were fulfilled through the RAPID network, 5% from WorldShare, and 5% from IDS Project. And as Bruce Jekyll, the founder and the digital librarian of the Internet Archive, mentioned, we are very excited about interlibrary loan at the Internet Archive. Something interesting, I want to talk just a little bit about our workflow. We use Slack. Internally at the Internet Archive, Slack has pretty much replaced email in terms of how we as an organization communicate among ourselves. And one of the great things about Slack is that it has open APIs, and you can integrate other things into Slack. And so one thing that we did right from the start, because Slack is sort of our institutional communication, we've integrated all of the different resource sharing networks into Slack. And so we have a Slack channel where all of those requests land, and we have that network of people that you saw with the goalpost around the world. They're using, and we have a workflow built into Slack that is how we fulfill requests. I'm not suggesting that that will work for any other library or any other organization, but it works for us. And another thing about interlibrary loan, we were having a conversation earlier today about interlibrary loan, and this surprises people. Brewster fulfills interlibrary loan requests. He's so interested in this process that, like, on Christmas Eve, he was fulfilling interlibrary loan request. And I mean, and that was one sort of extreme example, like, really? Christmas Eve? Yes. And every other day too. This is something that he's just really passionate about. So we spend a lot of time at the Internet Archive talking about interlibrary loan. So what's next? And I mentioned this is going to be quick, and maybe we'll have some good questions. Up next, we want to join other networks, right? Every provider, we want to be there. We just held an in-person session at the Internet Archive 2 weeks ago, and Charlie Barlow, the executive director of the Boston Library Consortium, was there, and he threw out a data point that I believe my memory is holding on to. That was that the Internet Archive is fulfilling 1 in 8 requests for the Boston Library Consortium. Now that sounds amazing. And when we heard that, when Charlie offered that, Brewster's response was, well, how can we be all of them? Or how can we be more? What can we do to get more, because we're fast, we're ready. What would it take to get to that we can fulfill more requests? Part of that obviously is coverage, right? I mean, we have to have the materials that you're wanting us to fulfill. So we're working on how do we build out our collection. Anyway, joining other networks so that we can have more participation, so that we can fulfill more requests. Also, serving our own patrons. So the Internet Archive has a patron base. You have to sign up for a library card to check out materials from the Internet Archive. And so the next step is how do we make our resource sharing networks available to the partners, to the patrons that the Internet Archive has. And then also looking at further down the road, peer-to-peer interlibrary loan, like through Reshare. How can, if you look at protocols, not platforms, how could we be building more of a peer-to-peer network for resource sharing fulfillment than necessarily a platform? So these are all conversations that we're having and things that we're really excited about. So, you know, borrow all the things. We think that interlibrary loan is a great library practice and something that we're very excited about in terms of making our materials available to the widest community possible. Just to wrap down here, in addition to the Internet Archive, or in addition to interlibrary loan, think of us for other library services. So our Archive It web service, we just launched a new COVID-19 web archive from all of the partners that we have who have been archiving materials with Archive It. So really interesting stuff. So you can use Archive It to build your own community webs. We still run scanning services. We're embedded in a number of libraries around the US and Canada where we are digitizing in partnership with the libraries. Controlled digital lending, I mentioned that a couple of times. So we have our Open Libraries program, which I help run. If you're interested in learning and working more with controlled digital lending, we have that available. There's the Wayback Machine, which is gathering materials every minute, every second around the web. And finally, think of donating materials to us. So we have an active donation program, both for monographs, as well as for serials, as well as microforms, the kinds of things that Better World Books, Thrift Books, other resellers, and literacy partners may not take from your library. Think of us. We're especially interested in LPs and microfilm, microform, microfiche. We love microfiche. We're just starting to work on getting good at digitizing microfiche in mass. Government documents. We love government documents too. Democracy's Library is a new effort that we launched 2 weeks ago, which is a free open repository of government data, government publications, and all the crawls that we have done of the government websites, the end of term crawl, and then everything from a .gov domain. So thanks for listening to this quick chat. And I would, before I go into questions, I want to mention one thing in terms of what's next. Next week, as it turns out, we're doing a resource sharing webinar with OCLC. So it's on November 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern. I also linked to that out of my Twitter feed. If you are a member of the OCLC WorldShare or the resource sharing networks at OCLC, please come to that webinar. You'll learn all the buttons to push and click to make sure that the Internet Archive is part of your list so that we can do that rapid, fast fulfillment for all of your libraries. So with that, thanks for your time and attention. I'd welcome questions. And we have Maria in the back with a microphone. So if you want to just raise your hand, Maria will come and then we'll take the questions. I'm also open to take other questions if you want to ask me anything that I can answer outside of resource sharing. Yeah.
Okay, hello. I am Melissa Amy Brown, the Director of Content Acquisition and Delivery at the University of Minnesota. And my question is, does the Internet Archive have content that other libraries don't have? Meaning, do you have unique content that I cannot get from another library, such as the University of Michigan and some of my other partners?
That is an excellent question. I don't have here's what I'm going to say. I don't have a definitive answer to say yes, but I think the answer is probably yes. But I would love to dig in more and kind of have that understanding and have that knowledge of what do we hold that's truly unique and or unique outside of other networks or consortia or individual partnerships. So that is an excellent data point that we will look into. How can we surface that? Because I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you, what would you do with that information? How would that be helpful? Yeah, great. I think what we've heard from previous people who have been using us, it's do we have unique content? Yes, we have heard that we have unique content. I don't know exactly around your collection, but it's also the speed. We have people who now know that they can request from us. We will fulfill that quickly. And so I think we've been sort of rising higher in people's priority list just because of the speed with which we can fulfill for the materials that we have. It's a great question. Thank you for that.
Hi, Chris. Maria Salva, Claremont Colleges in California.
Yes, hello.
I saw on one of your slides that you mentioned you accept donations of serials. Do you have somewhere a list of what you're looking for? Like if you have specific gaps or titles that you're looking for? We don't necessarily want to spam you with stuff you already have.
And we appreciate that and don't want materials that we don't already have. So for monographs, we have a pretty easy way of telling a library what you have in your collection that we already have, or conversely, what we don't have. For serials, it's a lot harder. Everyone who does holdings around serials understands that. So I'm kind of working around an answer, which is yes, we do have a way of checking serials. We don't have a wish list of like the gaps that we have, which that's a great suggestion. I wrote down, let's put out the list of what we need. And in addition, when we do talk, Liz Rosenberg is our full-time donations manager. This is a position that used to be sort of like a third of someone's job, and then has just grown over time now that libraries are back in the building in this era of the pandemic and weeding materials. So we're really active in terms of donations. So Liz Rosenberg is our full-time donations manager, and she will help prospective donors understand what we have in our collection and what we don't have. So this is a very long answer, and it's not a short answer, but the very long answer is we have someone who we will want to work with you to determine what's unique in your collection.
So potentially, if we know what we want to read, we could send you a list for you to tell us what you would accept?
Exactly right.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hi. Susan Stearns, Eastern Academic Scholars Trust. I'm just going to make a suggestion.
Yes.
Chris, if you can load your titles into the Print Archive Registry database that's run by the Center for Research Libraries. They have this great comparison tool that allows you to upload a spreadsheet and compare your holdings to any of the various shared print programs that have registered with CRL.
Great
so
idea.
you could get added to that. I'd be more than glad to put you in touch with folks there.
Please do. That would be excellent.
Sure.
Thank you, Susan. We have a question here. Can you wait for the, since we're streaming?
Thank you. I'm Michelle Ruth here at the Citadel. I was just wondering if you're talking with Ex Libris about creating another e-collection that, for those of us who have the Ex Libris products, so that we could add what's in Internet Archive to our catalogs.
This is where we really wish that Mike Richins was here to help answer that. The answer is we want to do that, yes. I can't speak, I've been more familiar with the work that we've done with OCLC to do something similar, and I can explain that here. So on a monthly basis, we sync our holdings with WorldCat, or with the OCLC knowledge base. We're doing something similar too with Rapid. I just don't know all the details with Rapid in the way that I know with OCLC. So I'm just going to talk about what we do with OCLC. We sync our materials on a monthly basis. OCLC has two different collections for the Internet Archive. One is called Free to Read. The other is called Free to Borrow. That's the difference between Free to Borrow is our controlled digital lending collection. Free to Read is the materials that are in the public domain. Those are two collections that are part of the knowledge base in OCLC, and they are available across the OCLC products. So you can use the collection that the Internet Archive has built, those two collections, as a comparator, for example, in Greenglass. We're working on similar things with Ex Libris, certainly in terms of syncing our materials, but the e-collection is something that I want to find out more. Yes, the answer is yes. We want to make sure that all of our materials are available so that any library can bring those into their discovery services. I think one of the ways that we're having this conversation with a couple of libraries in California, of thinking of the Internet Archive as your digital branch library, or as like a school library if you're in an academic institution. Our materials are the 3 million books that we've digitized and the 14,000 serials periodicals that we have available. Those are all available to your patrons, and in fact, your patrons are using them and checking those materials out right now. So. Sorry, a long, convoluted way of saying, yeah, we want to do that. Let me check with Mike and make sure that we're doing it the right way. Yeah, another question here.
Hi, thanks for this. So I'm Emily Campbell. I'm the Director of Resource Sharing at University of Michigan. And I guess for us, my copyright lawyers won't let us use you.
Can't help you with that.
I know, but I'm just wondering if there's some resolution to some of the things that are happening, if we're gonna see, because I mean, I think some of the things you're doing are really interesting. I have concerns about some other things, but I just, I would like to see us be able to maybe collaborate a little bit, but there's just a wall that's been put up, right?
Yep.
So
having worked in I worked at Washington University, so a conservative private institution with a very large law school and general counsels who were involved in every conversation that the library had. I feel your pain. I understand the situation that you're operating under. It's up to every individual library and each library consortium to determine how to partner, if to partner with the Internet Archive. That's a decision you have to make and that your general counsel has to make. Certainly not something that I can influence. In terms of the legal activities around the Internet Archive, so the Internet Archive is, as I assume many of you know, the Internet Archive is being sued by 4 of the world's largest publishers for controlled digital lending. We have the status of that lawsuit is that all of the materials in terms of the briefs have all been filed. We're done in terms of documents and the materials that each side puts together and sends to the judge. That happened, I think our last reply brief happened October 7th or something like that. So that means that all the case, all of the materials are now in the judge's hands. So it's up to the judge and the court to determine the timeline for the next step, and that's fully up to the judge to set. So when will we have resolution for the lawsuit? You know, if we look at University of Georgia, it can be a very long time. So I wish I had, oh, I knew that was going to happen. I have a cold, which is why I'm like masked up and trying to have coffee so that well, I'll clean that up later. I'll stand over here to the side. Yeah. I knew that was going to happen. We'll fix it. Other questions? There has to be another question after that spectacular failure. I didn't go through all of that just to have silence now. Yeah. Sure, please. Yeah. I got another half hour. Let's just keep going.
I just had a thought about dissertations. One
Yeah.
of the things that we have the hardest time obtaining for our patrons are dissertations, and have you had any thought of obtaining those types of resources?
Yeah, so in fact, we've scanned some dissertations, like where our partners have, the partners that we scan with, where they've put those forward. At Washington University, in our collection, we had 2 copies of dissertations dating back to something like the 1890s. And we were like, why are we holding on to 2 copies of both of these? Like, one would be probably sufficient, and could we digitize the others? But then that gets really expensive because you have a whole lot of materials. So we are digitizing some materials. We don't necessarily have a program for dissertations, but as they make their way through the scanning queue, we are digitizing them. It's great content, right? I mean, every library every university is sitting on top of this content that in some cases they can make available, and in some cases they can't because of other licensing restrictions, and there you go.
Thanks, that's very interesting. I'm really an advocate for making sure dissertations are open access, so I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful as we can. My other question is about just as you go into this interlibrary loan world and you're fulfilling these requests, are you relying on Section 108 the same way that we do? I'm
Yep.
assuming so. I just thought
Yep.
I'd.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you for letting me clarify that. We are operating an interlibrary loan in the way that every other library operates an interlibrary loan, full stop. All the same norms, all the same regulations. Are there other questions? Well, hearing no, oh no, yep, yeah, please.
Just a silly question. Are you doing all ILLs for free?
Yes. Simple, straightforward answer. I like that.
I'm sorry, I came in a little late, and I don't know if you talked about film at all.
Film, like media.
Yeah, media with the Internet Archive.
So currently, our resource sharing activities are limited to periodicals and monographs.
Are you thinking about moving into media?
It's certainly something that's come up. We get the same question around controlled digital lending, like, hey, it's great that you're doing monographs, but are you thinking about other media types? In terms of considering it, yes. Do we have a plan? Not at this time. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, please, yeah. Yeah.
I'm always kind of fascinated when I'm looking at Internet Archive and I'm searching an ISBN and I see pallet number 51 BWB and I go, oh, Better World Books.
Yes.
And that ISBN, that book must be on a pallet somewhere and it's going to be digitized someday. Am I correct?
You are absolutely correct.
All
yes.
right.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about that. Thanks. We're setting me up for so many good questions that I know that other people have too, and these are questions that have certainly have come up in other contexts. So the Internet Archive has a longstanding relationship with Better World Books. It was 3 years ago at Charleston where we announced a literacy partnership working together with Better World Books. Brewster and Dustin Holland, the CEO of Better World Books, were on stage announcing that partnership at the 2019 conference. With our relationship, the Better World Books knows about all of the books that the Internet Archive has in our inventory. In addition to what we have, they also know what we want. So we do have, to the question previously of do we have a wish list of the, like for gap fills, we don't have that for serials, but we do have a wish list for monographs. And that wish list was brought together around materials that are cited in open syllabus, widely held by libraries from the Library Link Network and from OCLC Holdings, and the materials that are cited in Wikipedia. We've put that together into a wish list of materials that we want to acquire and make available online. So Better World Books knows about our wish list, they know about our holdings, and anything that comes through their line that they can't sell or that we really want, those get moved to us. So rather than being either recycled, those materials, we get one copy, we digitize it, we preserve the physical in our physical archives, and then we make the digital copy available online through controlled digital lending. And because of all of that, we have, and so we do, the digitization of many of our materials happens in Cebu, in the Philippines. And so what you're seeing there is like a tracking system of how materials, containers of books are moving around the world in our physical archive from Better World Books to the Internet Archive, being shipped to be digitized, and then come back and live in our physical archive full time. So depending on where that container is, that ISBN, that is our routing and tracking system. It's our manifest of what we have. And as you might imagine, we have that because we're getting other donations from other libraries. And so we know what we've gotten. We don't always know what we're getting from a library, because as every library knows, when you're reading a collection and like you got the book truck rolling down the aisle, things magically find their way, especially out of librarians' offices, like, oh wait, hey, I need to put that box of things there. So we have this sort of multiple streams that are coming into our digitization flow. But we are using that ISBN tracking to understand what we've got on offer or what's been promised to us from Better World Books, and then you can take that information and reverse engineer it and find out what container the materials are stored in our physical archive. Our storage model is books in boxes, boxes on pallets. Pallets are double stacked, shrink wrapped, and then double stacked, and then put into containers. Container, like a 40-foot container like you'd see on the back of a semi or on a barge going across the ocean. That's how we transport materials. That's also how we store them. And we have, the next question that always comes is, well, are you monitoring? Yes, we are monitoring the materials actively, so we do know the environmental conditions around the materials that are in our collection. Very long-winded answer, but thank you for asking that.
First of all, I'd love to see pictures of that. I don't
Yeah,
know how
yeah.
public those are. I'm Megan Gaffney. I'm head of the Collections, Acquisitions, and Resource Sharing Department at the University of Delaware. Is your monograph wish list public or
is.
available? Because I send stuff to Better World Books, and it
Yeah.
might be more efficient to send it right to you.
Keep sending them to Better World Books, especially if you have a long-standing relationship. Then keep going, because again, they know of the materials that we want, so it's a fairly automated process for things to come from Better World Books to us. So keep going that way. And yes, we do have our monograph wish list available, and I'll add that to the tweet thread after. You can, if you go to archive.org and search for Open Libraries wish list, that will also take you there.
And is there also some information? I was doing some quick searching while you were talking, though I was paying attention, of course.
Of course.
And it looked a little bit hard for me to find like an email address that I could send hey, I would like to donate. Is there a place you could point me, or an email address that you could send, or maybe you can tweet that out?
I will. In fact, let me tweet that out. Here's the simplest email address to have, and this is the one like burning in your brain: info@archive.org. That's our patron services. That will we have real people, actual human beings who answer the phones at the Internet Archive and who respond to these requests. And that anything that comes into info@archive.org will get directed to the appropriate person. So Liz Rosenberg again is the person who manages our donations. Yeah. You also, another place to look would be help.archive.org, which is our help documentation. You can do a search for donations there. I think it's probably very prominent because it's probably the #1 help document that people are looking at right now. Are there other questions? Yeah. I'll answer everything I can.
So I'm just curious, like, if you have a like sense of like the subjects where you have a lot of like, I mean, I was just thinking about like for us, we have some old health sciences stuff that is just, we lend that like crazy,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm just curious if you have like a sense of your subject breadth or.
We don't at this point, just because we're relatively fresh in terms of what people are requesting. So we know, as I showed here on the stats, we know more about the age than we do the subject matter, but that's also an important metric to know a little bit more about what are people requesting, where are we unique. Well, listen, if anyone has additional questions, please come up, chat. I'm going to mask up if you do that for your benefit. I'm 10 days into a cold. Today was the first day that I woke up and felt like, hey, I think I can actually breathe like a human being again. And you should know I'm COVID testing in the hotel, so I'm all good. If you want to come chat with me, please do. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention.